Hey yo, what it do, peoples? What's good? It is your boy Kevin Wright, aka Kev on Mission, coming through. I wanted to take a little bit of time to talk to you about last night's halftime show. And in order to really get to the meat of what I want to talk about, I'm going to use an illustration of a story about around October of last year, which is when I found out that Dr. Dre, Eminem, Mary J. Blige, and Snoop Dogg and Kendrick were going to be the main performers at this year's halftime show. I remember being on campus, and to protect the guilty, I will not say where I was and who I was engaged in conversation with, but I remember mentioning the halftime show, and most of the people that I was talking to, like, oh yeah, like shaking their heads, like, okay, it's gonna be something. And then one individual in particular came out their mouth and said, but everybody's old. And I immediately said, hold up. Just because they got age on them doesn't mean they don't have relevance. Number one, every last individual that I mentioned that hit that halftime show last night, they still have active careers. Dr. Dre is still active in music. Snoop is still active in music. He just put an album out last week, matter of fact. Mary J. Blige just put an album out, I think last week, right around there. You got Kendrick, who I believe is working on another album as we speak. And plus, he's only 34, so he's technically not in the older category compared to Dre, who's 56, and Mary J. Blige, who's 51. Eminem, who's 49 years old and still kicking it, still out there. So, I mean, there's a lot to be said about the fact. And I was saying all that to these in this situation because of the comment that was made about the age range and the fact that they need to have younger blood. And as I just mentioned in my last video, us as an African American people, from a cultural standpoint, we've never been one to tell our elders that they are too old, they need to sit down and they need to just stop. Because even if you look now, you've got a lot of our elders, peeps in their 60s, 70s, and up, still doing it. Patti LaBelle, I believe she just turned 77, and she's still touring, doing the whole 9 yards. You've got individuals like Jennifer Lewis, who just turned 65, doing videos, still doing high kicks, and just wrote her second book and is about to be getting out there doing some things. And there's a lot more people, like even on the straight up ministry front, you got people in ministry that are in their 60s. TD Jakes is 64 and still out there like it's nothing. There's a lot of other folks I can name that are still doing the thing, and there are no signs of slowing down, and they're up in age. So age unto itself is not a determining factor of where to sit down. And if you're willing to learn, if you're willing to listen to those around you, there are ways you can stay relevant in spite of the fact that you have age on you. Matter of fact, that's why I also stress in that same video that we need to learn how to run together as a multi-generational peeps, because if you paid attention, if you go back and look at the careers of Snoop, Dre, all of them, the older ones who preceded, like George Clinton and the Parliament and all them older folks, they was hanging around in those early stages. You have even Mary J. Blige, specifically, if you see older interviews of her in the early stage of her career, she references folk like Shaka Khan and working with Stevie Wonder and all these other folks who are the ones, because they knew what resistance they had to deal with, because artists in the Motown era and the like wasn't being treated right as artists. They weren't getting their proper credits for music all the time and all type of stuff. Go back and look. I mean, that's part of our country's history. You like it or not, it is what it is. And it's there to see that things like that, because of racial disparities and tension, artists weren't being treated fairly, so they didn't have no choice but to learn how to have one another's back and look out for one another. So when it came to the 90s scene, which is where most of these artists that hit the Super Bowl came from, it was the same thing. And there was that multi generational of artists. Mary J. Blige has talked about it, but like I said, Shaka Khan, and even outside of Mary J. Blige, you got Beyonce, who's still out there, even in her early stages. And still, you had the early folks. You had folks like Luther Vandross telling her, "Girl, you better sing that. That's your voice. That's your instrument. You better learn how to take care of that thing." You had the older generation that was able to speak. Like, we as a people didn't tell our elders, "You need to sit down and mind your business." Matter of fact, I remember when it came to Destiny Child, I remember when they were starting to do their thing, Patti LaBelle was even saying, "Let these babies come on. Let these folks come out here and do what it is they're supposed to do," because there's always been a support. There's never been a stifling or a hindrance. There's never been a, "I still gotta get out here and compete." There was room for folks to still do their thing. And we, the church, can take a lesson from all of that. We, the church, can take a lesson, as I said previously, we can take a lesson from allowing those, because also, one of the things that I saw so many jokes following within the last day or so, and even heading up to the halftime show, people so busy was trying to make jokes and crack on people's ages, you are missing the fact that this is the very first time hip hop has ever taken center stage at the Super Bowl halftime show ever. Ever. It's never been done. Like, there have been elements of hip hop in previous halftime shows because of folks like Madonna and others who have featured folks, but you've never seen hip hop take the front platform up until last night. And that's a huge thing, because that even goes back into, because hip hop, especially that era of hip hop where Dre, Snoop, and all that, and that's a fraction, because we're not even talking about the East Coast. We're not even talking about the Wu-Tang. We ain't even talking about Biggie. We're not even talking about Method and Redman. We're not even talking about Bad Boy as a whole. I mean, there's a whole lot that still wasn't represented. But of course, because the Super Bowl was in LA, LA did represent, like Dr. Dre, Snoop, the last 30 years, 35 years, as Kendrick put it in his set, 35 years in the making. Like, these jokers have written the soundtrack for the last 35 years. And the fact that this is the first time hip hop's ever taken center stage, this is also the first time in a situation where you can see the OGs actually get to partake in what they fought so hard to see that kind of representation take place. Again, we, the church, can take some notes from that. We, the church, can understand that even when people are trying to silence and people want to clown, and to be clear, I'm not promising a Super Bowl platform or anything even close to that. I'm saying that as a creative, as someone who appreciates the arts, and someone who is always looking to find ways to move forward with and steward the gifts God's given me personally, understanding that there's a message in the music when it comes to being able to just push forward and doing what's necessary. And even when doors were shut, I remember I was laughing as some people talked about the fact how they didn't curse in the halftime show. I'm like, you do understand, like, Dre and Snoop and all these people, they've been around for years upon years, because in the 90s, it absolutely was unacceptable to use any type of profanity on daytime TV, on family television, any of that. So either you had to be a rebel and wait for the producers to get rid of it, but in most cases, they knew how to finesse them lyrics so that they didn't have to curse. And last night was one of those things. Again, having to learn how to persevere and push through, because again, usually when it comes to pushing for representation and stuff, we as a people, we don't always get to see the fruit of that. So the fact that some of the OGs and the originators and the writing of a soundtrack peoples got to participate on that kind of a platform is also a really dope thing. So now moving down the line, future generations of folks who have hip hop music in their genes and blood and everything else is going to be able to move forward and to be able to see that those who went before me took it all the way to the top platform. Again, when it comes to us as a body, when it comes to us as a people within the church, I am in no way, shape, or form saying that we're going to get those types of major platforms. However, what I am saying is that we can trust God to steward and use well what the gifts He gave us, and we can trust Him to open doors and give us access in areas of influence that you may not expect to have, things that you may not necessarily even be looking for, things that you're not even trying to go out there and get, but because you're being steadfast and you're being persistent and you're using your gift the way the Lord's called you to use your gift, there are folks out there who are not stepping foot into a church who see what you're doing and are like, wait a minute, we gonna open these doors to you and we gonna let you come in here because we see what you out here doing and we see you staying true to what it is you about, and that's the person of Jesus Christ and Him crucified. So those are a few thoughts that I wanted to speak to. Again, this is why it is important for us as multi-generation and multicultural to run together as the body. Now, real deal multicultural, where people actually have voices and you're willing to have difficult conversations and you're not willing to settle for stiff arming and other types of coldness as a means of operation, but having real deal genuine conversation to be able to labor together, understanding that as older individuals that we can learn certain methods and operations from the younger people, learning that those of us who are in the younger crowd, even though I'm getting in the older part, I'm not in my 60s and 70s, so there's a lot of wisdom for folks 60s, 70s, and even 80s. As I mentioned in the last one, like, yo, we need to learn how to pull on that. And also because I'm in my 40s, I look at peeps in my 20s. Like, I'm in campus ministry. I learn a lot from being around students. You can learn a lot about methods of how to do, like, that's how I know about Vimbo. That's how I know about a lot of things I learned about because of being in campus ministry. And these are things that the students is doing. So being around the younger generation, they got a thing or two or five they can teach us where we at if we're willing to just sit down and run together and listen. So again, the halftime show was a perfect example of age not being a factor, because I also know plenty of people who are in their 20s who are equally as hype to see the halftime show go down the way it did last night. And don't let the clowning social media fool you. There was plenty of folks who was like, I can't wait, because nowadays folk got the internet and all that stuff. And they know how to go back and look them records up. They know who it is that's been paving the way and doing stuff. So to see those who have paved the way get a chance again, that's a lesson to the church. We can learn, be persistent in what it is God gave. Do the right thing. Stay in the prayer closet. Stay in the place of prayer. Stay in the scriptures. Stay studying the word to show yourself approved. Work at your craft with excellence. If you're like myself, if you're creative, you're a writer, singer, musician, stay in the place of continuing to perfect the craft, and we can trust the Lord to open doors. And I'm not even going to try to pretend like I know exactly what the doors are, but I know that doors of influence can be opened when you're persistent and you're faithful to see the Lord glorified in every sphere, which includes the area of arts and entertainment. All right, y'all, that's it. As usual, if this is useful to you, please share it with somebody. If you like what you're seeing, please subscribe. If you have ideas, you have thoughts, please email me at kevonmission2.0@gmail.com, and we can keep this conversation going. Also, hop in these comments. Let me know your thoughts, and we'll continue this thing. We're going to keep it going because, like I said, there's a lot going down this upcoming semester. There's some cool stuff going on. This is just something that hit me while I was on my tent making grind earlier, and I thought about it. I said, this is something I'd like to speak to. So I did it. So here it is. All right. Those of y'all who have been supporting, thank you. Appreciate y'all. Love y'all. Talk to y'all soon. Peace.